for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me wave onto this committee. As you know, I represent the 11th Congressional District in Texas, which encompasses a large part of the Permian Basin in West Texas. Extremely disappointed to see the dunes, sagebrush lizard, as a listed endangered species at this point. The day before we celebrated our nation's independence, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced that it would be proposing the listing of the dune sagebrush lizard as an endangered species under the ESA. And I believe this is once again, Mr. Chairman, an attack, a weaponization of an agency, a federal agency, and specifically against the most prolific energy producing region in the world. I do have many questions, but before I get to them, there has been a tremendous effort both by the state and private stakeholders and initiatives to protect this particular species. And quite frankly, this proposal is a slap in the face of conservationists who are in that area, who have lived and worked in that area for many, many years, who know that area. And like many other agencies that I talk to, the response I get when was the last time you visited the Permian Basin? And I'll ask you, Director Williams, when was the last time you visited the Permian Basin?
Mr. Chair, Congressman Pfluger, I lived in Oklahoma for a long time, but I have not visited it in the past 2 years.
Thank you. Okay. And that's generally, Mr. Chairman, the response I get. Director Williams, is this listing in response to a negotiated settlement?
Mr. Chair, no, this listing is not in response to a negotiated settlement. It's due to the science and the law.
Were there other private parties that were part of this listing?
Mr. Chair, no. In fact, the service, there are private parties who the service has worked with over decades, like you mentioned, where we have worked to streamline compliance options like candidate conservation agreements, safe harbor agreements, habitat conservation plans. So we have been working with private parties in these conservation efforts.
And Director Williams, what are you an advocate for renewable energy?
Mr. Chair, Congressman, indeed, yes, renewable energy is important.
Can you tell us the impact that this will have on renewable sources of energy such as wind and solar and the building of wind and solar?
Mr. Chair, Congressman Pfluger, there are times where the Fish and Wildlife Service, we make our decisions based on the science and the law and are working with individuals the best we can to ameliorate any impact. In this instance, the loss of Shinnery oak habitat that the dune sagebrush lizard relies on is irreversible. We've not found a way to recreate that habitat.
Will you provide the committee with a list of peer review group representatives, their affiliations that reviewed the dune sagebrush lizard?
Mr. Chair, Congressman Pfluger, absolutely.
You know, you talk about the science. I'm questioning your science. I'm going to go ahead and just say it out loud. I'm questioning your science here because a report on the DSL done at the end of 2022 shows that there has been a net conservation gain for this particular species. And these private and state-led conservation efforts are working, yet the service still listed the DSL, the dune sagebrush lizard. So how does the service decide to list a species where 98% of the lands are privately have a private supplemental conservation effort?
Mr. Chair, Congressman Pfluger, it's wonderful when conservation agreements can help with the species, and indeed, perhaps, there are benefits to that, but not enough to bring the species to the point where it doesn't need to be listed.
There have been hundreds of millions of dollars spent in an effort to do real conservation. And I'm questioning, because you haven't been to the Permian Basin recently, and I'm very disappointed in that, to tell you the truth. Similar to the Secretary of Energy, similar to FERC, similar to the EPA, similar to many other agencies. But will you please answer this? Was this species listed in an attempt to kill the fossil fuel industry?
Mr. Chair, Congressman Pfluger, absolutely not.
So you will share the peer-reviewed documents and the science, because the stakeholders in my area who have a vested interest in providing affordable, reliable energy to this country have reported back that none of that has actually been done, that the stakeholder communication, that the work between Fish and Wildlife, the state and local level has not happened. So I am questioning your science, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see the documents, the peer-reviewed documents that Fish and Wildlife Service has.
Mr. Chair, Congressman Pfluger, as the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, I do want to take this opportunity to support the hardworking employees of the Fish and Wildlife Service and the science and the work that they put into this, and that is not questionable. You may question me, but I will not question the
My time has expired,
our
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
employees.
I yield back.